According to Sartre, essence is not something given or determined, but is a product of ongoing human existence and the choices made within it. Sartre's existentialism centers on the notion of existence preceding essence, suggesting that individuals define themselves through their actions and choices rather than possessing inherent predetermined characteristics. Individuals have the freedom to define their essence through conscious choices and actions. Sartre emphasizes the significance of subjective experience in defining essence. Replicating this complex web of experiences and interactions in a digital afterlife raises philosophical questions regarding the authenticity of the identity created within an AI persona. Aristotle's essence is essential for understanding reality, and that underlying reality determines an object's existence. 20. In acquiring knowledge and understanding the nature of existence, essence is the defining characteristic of an object or a thing that makes it what it is. Locke defines essence as the internal constitution or nature of anything, whereby it is what it is. Locke argued that essence is not something that can be directly observed or known, but rather must be inferred from the observable qualities of the object. Describing analog photography, Barth states, "Photography has something to do with resurrection." Chung suggests that digital techniques produce images in cryogenic form. They can be awoken, reanimated, brought up to date. Digital manipulation can resurrect the dead. The concept of essence provides a philosophical framework for examining whether AI personas can possess human essence. Essence is relevant to the discussion on personhood, human agency, and the self. Essence is the basic nature of things and the qualities that define them. Plato's theory of essences was the key to true understanding and wisdom. He argued that by contemplating the forms, we can gain knowledge of the eternal, unchanging realities that underlie the world of appearances. This knowledge is superior to knowledge gained through our senses, which can be deceptive and changeable. It refers to the true nature or underlying reality of a thing, and it is closely tied to his theory of forms. For Plato, knowledge of essences is essential to true understanding and wisdom. Photographs culturally mediate the experience of death, stimulating conversations and identifying the hierarchy of the family, reinforcing the social bond with the deceased. Photography is an aid to scaffolding more complex and layered narratives and contextualized experiences and rendering loss comprehensible. Photographs are mediational tools for meaning-making and are used to reflect on and regulate emotions and grief experiences. Niemeyer and others suggest that creating a narrative backstory of our relationship with the deceased restores a sense of attachment and continuity. Post-mortem portraits gave proof that death had happened. Photographs are relics, material objects of the deceased, and connect the dead with the living. Keith Derrida suggests that the self is constructed through photography, an interpretation through representation. But in death, the trace of our selfhood is remembered with technology, but as time passes, there is an effacement of traces. The mourning rituals in Victorian post-mortem portraits and mourning tableaux created images in an evocative manner, with the living posed with the dead in lifelike poses or the last sleep. Creating this inner essence of an individual with photography was highly praised within the photography community. To secure a portrait of a man in his completeness, mind and body, instead of a mere mask of his physical presentment, I consider the highest aim of the most skillful portrait painter, the crowning glory of the photographer. Photography is also associated with death, influencing how people remember and mourn the dead. In an era of high mortality rates in Victorian Britain and during the American Civil War, and the absence of commissioned photographs during a loved one's lifetime, a post-mortem photograph was proof of their existence and helped keep the deceased memory alive. Since its invention in the 19th century, portrait photography has been a medium that captures a person's likeness or physical appearance. However, the concept of essence in portrait photography adds more meaning to the image. The 19th century portrait photographer aimed to interpret the self beyond the physical, the sitter's essence. Julia Margaret Cameron experimented with the daguerreotype process and photographed some of the great thinkers and creatives of the day and aimed to capture the greatness of the inner, not the outer man. Buben suggests that as we create and interact with AI versions of the dead, we move from recollecting to replacing the dead, and that replacement will mitigate loss and grief. The practice of remembrance with photographs becomes the practice of replacement by bots and avatars. Are these conversational goods a mere resource? If bots and avatars are the Yamaguchi for the AI generation, and they rely on human interaction to communicate, do they lack subjectivity and agency and therefore essence? There is a shift in how we relate to the world and why we incorporate AI personas into the grieving process. From a phenomenological perspective, grief is not about our relation to the dead, but our relation to the world. Our identity shifts when someone close to us dies. Their accumulated history and experience, a shared life, and roots in a place go out of sync while the bereaved and the dead take on new roles. Lindemann argues that there are serious ethical implications to consider when the bereaved create chatbots of the deceased, such as dignity and autonomy of the deceased, and should only be used for medical purposes and not by commercial for-profit death tech companies. She suggests that there needs to be more focus on the possible negative impact on the bereaved, such as prolonged grief disorder, and that regulation is needed. The commercial death tech industry is a profit-seeking industry, using digital remains for the monetization of the digital afterlife of users, such as the capitalization of human remains, which requires the payment of subscription fees by the bereaved or suffering a second loss, while creating a culture of ongoing grief where the bereaved never move on from death, which may be detrimental to the grieving process. The digital afterlife industry is a commercially driven sector where the dead are digitally mediated within our everyday technologies to maintain ongoing relationships between the living and the deceased. In our digital society, death is mediated not through thought and prayer, but through Facebook, WhatsApp, and animated avatars created from still photographs. For the digitally connected, the internet enables millions of people to embark on a quest to be remembered by leaving digital traces that can be stored and inherited. Digital legacy is information that exists in digital form after death and includes social media profiles, email, digital music, photos, videos, and other digital assets. Walter suggests that the purpose of grieving is to construct a durable biography that allows survivors to continue to integrate the deceased person into their lives. While Walter focused on a durable biography based on the physical life of the deceased, digital technologies have enabled the creation of new forms of durable biographies that extend beyond the physical. Morris and Brubaker argue that allowing mourning to leak into everyday life blurs the separation of life and death. The internet blurs traditional spatial boundaries when the dead are virtually present. The dead are re-embodied within our digital devices, regenerating a dynamic relationship by constructing a durable biography. AI personas of the deceased echo Victorian post-mortem portraits, but instead of the bereaved sharing stories about the dead, AI personas tell their own stories for a digital legacy, reshaped by technology, perhaps creating a digital essence. Mormon and Lewis described the digital afterlife as the restless dead in the digital cemetery, referring to cultural shifts with digital commemoration, social and cultural ideas around death, and the linking of Victorian post-mortem photos of the deceased at rest or asleep. In the digital afterlife, the posthumous deceased are anything but asleep. They wait for the living to be active and animated. Cyberspace interrupts previous limitations of physical cemeteries and biological death. They wait with digital persistence. If death is the spectacle, technology is the lens. In her examination of the death tech industry before 2019, Savin Baden sees the durable biography evolving into an enduring biography created from the digital legacy of the dying and the bereaved. Wright suggests that digital remains should refer to digital data, and the digital data of memories should have value and status, and therefore be protected, otherwise there is a risk of a second death, referring to the loss of the deceased online and mobile. Savin Baden defines the digital afterlife as an active or passive presence after death. Passive memorialization is Facebook memorial pages of the deceased. Active presence technology consists of conversational chatbots or avatars where the person communicates back to the human. The distinction between a live physical person and the dead is becoming increasingly blurred. When reality and online reality overlap, it is difficult to distinguish between what is real and artificial. Sofka introduced the concept of thanatology as a means to articulate the interplay between death and technology. and examine the implications of emerging digital platforms for death and dying practices. Saven-Barden defines the digital afterlife as an active or passive presence after death. Passive memorialization is Facebook memorial pages of the deceased. Active presence technology consists of conversational chatbots or avatars where the person communicates back to the human. The distinction between a live physical person and the dead is becoming increasingly blurred. When reality and online reality overlap, it is difficult to distinguish between what is real and artificial. Sofka introduced the concept of thanatology as a means to articulate the interplay between death and technology, and examine the implications of emerging digital platforms for death and dying practices. In her examination of the death tech industry before 2019, Saven-Barden sees the durable biography evolving into an enduring biography created from the digital legacy of the dying and the bereaved. Wright suggests that digital remains should refer to digital data, and the digital data of memories should have value and status and therefore be protected, otherwise there is a risk of a second death, referring to the loss of the deceased online and mobile. The concept of a digital afterlife, the digital extension of life after physical death, challenges the notion that death is final. The digital afterlife is not denying that the dead are dead, but that they are still part of our lives. AI expands the possibilities of commemorating the deceased and managing the grief of those left behind, complementing or replacing formal structures of faith and belief systems. Death is integrated into online networks and mobile communication machines. The digital afterlife creates everlasting memorials in the post-mortem context of mixed religious and secular beliefs. The concept of a digital afterlife, the digital extension of life after physical death, challenges the notion that death is final. The digital afterlife is not denying that the dead are dead, but that they are still part of our lives. AI expands the possibilities of commemorating the deceased and managing the grief of those left behind, complementing or replacing formal structures of faith and belief systems. Death is integrated into online networks and mobile communication machines. The digital afterlife creates everlasting memorials in the post-mortem context of mixed religious and secular beliefs.